and he thought it no wonder that he, even he, had been tossed off under the circumstances. The crew, who were not sitting on a skimming dish, as it were, had their work cut out to hold on. As he looked, he measured his drift with serious disquietude, although the preposterous idea of anybody being drowned had not as yet occurred to him. Drowned here? A good joke, indeed! Why, they were within hail of Sandridge, and half a dozen ships, or they would have been, but for the noise of wind and water, which smothered lesser sounds, and the lights of Williamstown, amongst them that of the little home awaiting him, studded the shore on the other hand, near and clear, like the eyes of a host of watching friends. And in Hobson's Bay, which could hardly cover the body of a sunk yacht, and right up by the river, which had to be dredged all the time to keep it open. But where was Lily? It scared him to find himself out of arm's reach of her, forced back by the swell, and not to see her immediately when he was able to look. He saw the launch, which of course was entirely occupied in her rescue, and saw two white buoys floating, and saw a line thrown, but nothing else, except the wild water that buffeted him, and the moonless night overhead. And he remembered that the river channel, indeed, Hobson's Bay in any part, was just as dangerous as mid-Atlantic to one who could not swim. The thought clutched him like a hand at his throat. "Got her?" he yelled, in a fury of terror. "Got her? See her?" He strained to make himself heard by the men on the launch in a way to burst his heart. They shouted something that he could not understand, and a line came whizzing past him. He caught it as it dropped, and soon lessened the distance between them. Then he perceived a long boat hook stretching out into the darkness. It went up and down with the toss of the boat, like the fishing rod of an impatient schoolboy, and a few yards beyond its reach, where it touched water, there was a dim smudge. He knew it for the full cape of Lily's mackintosh, outspread upon the waves. They alternately rumpled and smoothed it, flapping it into all shapes, as they tossed and toyed with it, but, by the mercy of heaven, it had held her up. In the middle of the mass he could see her dear little head hanging forward and downward, just under the surface, out of which a larger or smaller speck of her white fascinator rose and gleamed as each roll swung her up into the light of the boat's lamp turned upon the spot. This told him that she was already helpless and unconscious, although 10 seconds had not elapsed since she went over. God send that she had not struck anything, that her heart was not weak, that she was not subject to any of the mysterious consequences of shock peculiar to the more than ordinarily complex woman. At any rate, she had not had time to drown. He had seen a man recovered after being under for 40 minutes, and in less than one they would be taking her full speed to Williamstown, signalling for the doctor as they went. What would the fellows ashore make of the 3 whistles 3 times there before they got across? They would know the launch that blew them, and her present errand, and think, perhaps, that the crew were on the spree. But no, they would have more sense than that. They would look at the wild night, and conclude that something had happened. So would the doctor, who would hear the summons from his bed. What would they all say to him, Guthrie Carey, with his good seaman's record behind him, when he brought his wife home in such a state of dilapidation? However, All's well that ends well. Let him only have her safely there, and he would not mind what anybody said, and he'd take precious good care not to run any risks with her again. Water-logged as he was, and cramped in his overcoat, he made a violent bound towards the floating cape, lunged twice, caught it at the second try, and pulled it eagerly, alas, too eagerly. He felt the tug of Lily's weight only just long enough to be sure that she was there, and then the fastenings gave way, and she slipped through. The empty garment swam up to him on the edge of a new wave, which clapped it over his face like a gigantic plaster. Oh, this is dreadful! She would be rescued eventually, of course. Amongst them they would not let her drown, not if skill and courage had any show at all. But the fact that she was in danger could no longer be ignored. She was a little delicate thing, already overcome, and precious time was wasting. Then every second was of the most stupendous consequence. With a frenzied gesture, Guthrie shook off the cloak, spluttered, spat, and made a dive to intercept her as she went down, wondering as he did so whether breath and strength would hold out if he missed her and had to follow her to the bottom. The swing of the swell was awful, and the darkness of the blind night too cruel for words. "If only I had this cursed coat off!" he dumbly sobbed. "If only I could get rid of these damned lace boots!" Bad words would have been forgivable, even had he not been a sailor. He missed her, groped desperately, to the verge of suffocation, and came up to cough, and groan, and pump breath enough to take him down again. It would have cost 5 minutes to get his clothes off, and there was not a single second to spare now. "See her!" he shrieked. "Ne'er a sign!" Bill Hardacre shouted. "But we'll catch her when she rises. Take a turn of the line round you, sir, so we can haul you in." But there was not even time for that, in the frightful race of these vital moments. She was gone, and she must be found, and there was but her husband to look for her. The two other men were few enough for the safety of the launch as she was then situated, and besides, Hardacre could be more useful to Lily above water than below. The neighbouring ships lay undisturbed, putting off no boats to help. In all that band of lights, ringing the black welter of the bay, like stars out of the infinite, shining calmly upon an abandoned world, not one was moving. Guthrie Carey gave a last look round, identified the window of what was to have been his home, where the fire was burning brightly, the little supper spread. Good Mrs. Hardacre watching for them at the door, heard the landlady's cousin wailing, "Lil! Lil!" and again plunged under, arms wide and eyes staring, and heart bursting with despair. Everything in him seemed bursting, an agonizing sensation as his overstrained lungs collapsed, and the power of his strong limbs failed him. Then everything seemed to break away and let in the floods of Lethe, with a rush, confusion and forgetfulness, and a whirl of dreams, settling to a strange peace, an irresistible sleep, as if he had swallowed a magic opiate. The sea took him, as a nurse takes a helpless child, and floated him up from the place where he had been savagely groping. Something met him half-way, floating down upon him, and his arms went round it of their own accord. But they were powerless to clasp or hold it. It passed him, sinking gently, and lay where it sank, under all the turmoil as still as